Look, we all know this summer transfer window feels like one of the biggest in the club's recent history. But after doing a bit more research, let's talk about some alarming stats behind substitutes this season that really highlight the problem that this current Newcastle squad faces and what we need to do to get to the next level for the 25-26 season. It's all coming up, Newcastle fans, so if you're curious, make sure you stick around. Welcome back to Black White Banter, ladies and gentlemen, and it is crunch time. It is not D-Day, D-Week. Not that that's a term that anyone ever uses. It's all eyes on Everton. We know to get the job done, we need to win the football match. Let's not rely on anyone else. We don't want draws. We don't want nails being bitten. Big start from the off, and Champions League football will cap off the best season in my lifetime. But I'm not here to talk about that. If you're new, ladies and gentlemen, please whack that follow, whack that subscribe. Get Black White Banter across all social media. Now, after that frustrating Arsenal game, which was very frustrating, we certainly had our chances to win the match had David Raya not turned into the Incredible Hulk. And on another day, we might have been clapping all the way to Champions League before the final day even came around. But in my deep dive that I like to do for a shorter video of the 5 things we learned, I couldn't help but think in that second half when Eddie Howe went from 5 at the back to a 4-3-3 to try and change the game and bring Lewis Miley into a midfield 3, and we did have a bit more urgency. It just got me thinking about substitutes this season when we've been chasing games, which very fortunately hasn't been very often, obviously why we've had such a good season. But the very little impact they've had, but mainly how much that highlights, even more so than we already knew, how big this summer transfer window really is coming up if Newcastle want to go to the next level with European football in mind, but also compete in the Premier League and go that one step further, maybe even to the teams above us. Now look, I think we'd all agree the biggest shock to come from Sunday's game down at the Emirates in terms of team news was Callum Wilson coming in, who has been one of those big used subs when he's actually been fit and available for us. But also, I looked at the second half, and when I was writing those 5 things that I like to do for a shorter video that I learned from the match, I couldn't help but wonder exactly what sort of impact our substitutes have made. Because Eddie Howe reverted from 5 at the back to a 4-3-3. Lewis Miley came into the fold, and when we were chasing the game, there just wasn't enough there to get us over the line. And yes, Anthony Gordon didn't have the best game. Some of our players starting the match didn't. But you are still looking for someone to come on and change things. So let's look at what the numbers look like across the season. I'm going to share them on the screen. This is the most goal contributions from substitutes made in the Premier League. Wow. Look at the company Newcastle find themselves in. 18th with over 150 substitutes made across the season. What's even more alarming from this is that 2 of those 3 goals were scored by Harvey Barnes much earlier in the season when he wasn't actually starting matches. If anyone remembers the absolute screamer at Wolves to win us the football match when he came on in half-time, but also a late goal when we won away at Nottingham Forest. So 2 of those are now from a player who was once synonymous for a super sub, and we were talking about whether that's all he'd ever be. And now he's in the starting lineup, so he's not even an option anymore to come off the bench. Now, I will go on record with these stats and say that Newcastle, as I mentioned at the start of this video, have been very lucky. So yes, we've got some of the lowest goal contributions from substitutes made, but Newcastle United also got the most points this season out of any other side from winning positions. So what does that tell you? Well, Eddie Howe, many times this season, luckily, hasn't been bringing subs on to change the game and turn the game around. He's actually been bringing substitutes on, the likes of Lewis Miley more recently, the likes of Sean Longstaff earlier in the season, the likes of Emil Kraft, to shore things up and hold what we have, and we've been very good at that. But it can't help but make me wonder, especially with the increased fixtures next season, if we had a better squad, and yes, injuries have obviously played a factor in that, how much those losing positions that we found ourselves in might have been turned around by having a better squad and better options to come off the bench. And again, I just want to reiterate, I don't think this is an Eddie Howe problem, this is a Newcastle United problem, and how important it highlights this summer window really is. So let's look at the most sub-players by Newcastle this season. Well, Joe Willock's top. And this is not a video to dig out any individuals. I've said repeatedly, I personally think Joe Willock is a player, as some are, and there isn't even any scientific explanation behind that, who needs minutes and he needs momentum to improve. I didn't actually think he was that bad at Brighton a couple of weeks ago. Against Arsenal, he had a shot that he maybe should have hit the target with, coming inside from the left. as we pushed and pushed and pushed. But a player like that being the most subbed on tells you everything about where Newcastle's squad really is, because he's only got 2 assists and not a single goal this season. I'm looking further down the list, Sean Longstaff, who's now not deemed good enough, according to Eddie Howe. The fact that he must be making the teas in the background, because we have not seen him in so long. Callum Wilson, who's still yet to score a goal this season other than a tap-in the FA Cup or register any kind of assist. I know he came close at Brighton when we were chasing that match. William Asula, lots of people want to see more of him. He still looks a bit of a loose cannon. I think Eddie Howe's maturing him into the player he wants him to be. But that list for me just screams the exact definition of where Newcastle need to be. And I even got a little bit deeper into this. For me, the proof really is in the pudding of why having a larger squad and a decent substitutes bench to come on and change a game can be beneficial. The 3 biggest teams for goal contributions from subs made this season, as of recently, Fulham, Brighton and Bournemouth. And I look at those 3 teams individually, with all due respect to them, and I do not see their starting 11 as having maybe as many big European, not superstars, because I don't think we're quite there yet, but you know, Alexander Isak, one of the best in Europe. Bruno, fantastic central midfield. Tonali, European class, Champions League level. We have that in our first core 11. Fulham, Brighton and Bournemouth have used a larger squad to climb up that table, and as it stands right now, be fighting for European football. I think Fulham are the only one who've just slipped out of the race for Conference League. So using a squad, maximising a squad, and the 5 subs you can now make instead of 3 has been proved by the likes of those 3 sides, with really astute signings and good managers really getting the most out of that and getting their teams over the line in matches to get more points this season. If Newcastle United can get a bigger squad and see more impactful stats than what I've just showed you on the screen that are incredibly alarming, that is going to be the difference between us competing, being able to compete in Europe and the league week in, week out, but also continue closing the gap. There's even an example of what it might be like just to get you slavering a little bit, as it did for me. Does anyone remember the Brighton game just a couple of weeks ago when we had Anthony Gordon back and raring to come on? What you would call one of our best players on his day in the squad, attacking-wise. He came onto the pitch and within seconds he almost won a penalty when it went to VAR and he won a free kick instead. Imagine a world where Newcastle can add 3, 4, 5 bodies this summer without PSR, and those are the kind of substitutes we can all be stood in the stands urging to come on. It's no discredit to Lewis Miley, who's one for the future. It's no discredit to Emil Kraft, who has been reliable, steady Eddie Krafu since he came into this football club. But the likes of him, Miley, Joe Willock, Callum Wilson, who I think's time is up, is not the sort of squad to get you those extra points. And as much as an incredible season as it's been, it highlights where we still need to go, because, my God, can you imagine the extra points we could have got this season if we'd had that bigger squad to go that one little step further in matches when we've been behind? I look at Fulham at home. I look at Brighton away recently when we just got the draw and couldn't unlock them. I look at Arsenal on Sunday when we went to a formation change and Eddie Howe totally mixed things up, but he didn't quite have the players to unlock quite a stubborn Arsenal side. I found these substitute stats really interesting from Sunday. It got my brain in overdrive, and for me highlights how huge, regardless of what happens against Everton on Sunday in that race for Champions League football, this summer really is. I'm curious to get your thoughts, Newcastle fans. Do you think any of the players that are on this current substitutes bench right now, the likes of Willock, Miley, do you think any of them need to leave? And where do you see this summer going, and how many players do you think we realistically need to bridge that gap that has been the topic of this video? Just a short one from me today, but an interesting one that got my brain really ticking. If you've watched this far and you like this video, Newcastle fans, do us a little favour, whack that like, whack that follow, whack that subscribe. There'll be plenty more content before the Toffees arrive at St James's Park for the penultimate game of the 24-25 season, and what I hope is a day we are all celebrating. Keep the faith, and as always, who are your heads?